Borthakur IAS Academy প্রস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 21st June 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. Massive distribution of ex gratia will strain finances, says Center. So recently someone filed a petition or a number of petitions asking the central government to pay a compensation of rupees 4 lakhs under the lines of natural disasters in front of the Supreme Court. In a reply to this set of petitions, the central government came out and said that there is an inherent difference between COVID-19 pandemic and natural disasters, and COVID-19 pandemic is not a one-time disaster such as earthquakes and floods. When earthquakes and floods happen, the governments, whether it may be state governments or central governments, do pay certain amount of compensation from disaster funds, particularly natural disaster funds that the central governments and state governments have. So these affidavits were particularly asking to consider COVID-19 pandemic as a natural disaster and pay compensation to people who lost or families who lost loved ones due to COVID-19 virus. As I said, the central government said that this cannot be done because unlike natural disasters which are one and done, COVID-19 pandemic is not short and finite, meaning it is occurring on a continuing basis. And the government also said that COVID-19 pandemic was not only restricted to a certain part of the country or the country alone, it has affected all countries in the world. Currently, the number of deaths due to COVID-19 stands at 3.85 lakhs. Mind you, recently various state governments revised their death tolls, and to utter shocking of many people in the society, the numbers were 6 to 7 times higher than earlier official counts. So it is widely expected that the number will increase substantially by the time we see the complete end of COVID-19. The number might be staggering and disheartening at the same time. So coming back to this article itself, the government is clearly saying that first, the common disaster rules of compensation do not apply to COVID-19 because this is not one and done. We have been seeing cycles of COVID-19 repeatedly happening, and the end is not very near than everybody is thinking it to be. 2. If we end up paying compensation across the country at this particular juncture as a compensation or ex gratia to people who lost lives to COVID-19, it will certainly dry up financial resources of central government and state governments. Now, many state governments and particularly central governments have fallen back on state disaster response funds to compensate for the deficiencies in their finances. If the entire disaster response funds are spent on ex gratia or compensation money, states wouldn't have any money left to be spent on organizing COVID-19 response, providing critical infrastructure, medical or otherwise, or take care of any other disasters that are simultaneously happening with COVID-19. Look at IAS, look at other cyclones that are befalling India right now. So clearly, though the intention of the petition may be good, that is filed in front of Supreme Court, clearly the economics do not add up to it, and it is not in the best interest of the nation to pay out compensation, however small it may be, to the victims of COVID-19. That seems to be the stance of central government and state governments at this point of time. Moving on to the next article, only 8% of inmates inoculated in Delhi jails. So this particular issue is not only relegated to Delhi jails, it applies to pan-India jails. Now what is the problem here? When data and statistics are being considered or studied, people are clearly seeing a discrepancy in the number of people getting vaccinated who are languishing in jails. Remember, India has a problem of under trials, meaning majority of the people who are currently lodged in various jails across India are under trials. Their trial is still going on, and due to COVID-19 pandemic, many of the short-term trials that were supposed to happen within 1 month or 2 months or 1 week or 2 weeks got postponed or prolonged for a year or two, forcing these people or resulting in these people spending more than what they deserve to be in jails. So coming back to the issue, when a study has been done, around 8% of total inmates that are lodged in Tihar jail, Rohini or Mandoli jails were found to be vaccinated. Now this is the issue, right? Because though, as I said, many of them are under trials and they are not yet either acquitted or found guilty of the charges that they have been, or the cases that they have been accused of. Though vaccination drives are being conducted, it seems that it is skewed towards jail authorities versus jail inmates. But nonetheless, there are certain challenges involved in the vaccination drive itself. We know what are those challenges. And it seems that in the list of priorities or the line of priorities of people receiving vaccination, somewhere along the line, inmates in various jails lodged across country have been a little bit pushed down. So that needs to be addressed right now, because at the end of the day, these people do have rights, and this jail issues or the under trials issue or the inmates in jails issue has long been bogging down India in terms of certain human rights aspects and certain representation aspects also. So nonetheless, this discrepancy must be addressed at one point or the other, and the sooner the better. So moving on to the next article, the comrades and their divergent perspectives. So this is a wonderful article on respects to the Russian stance on Beijing and India relations. So before getting into this, let us understand one thing. Prior to April of 2020, when China proactively and once in a one-sided way came and occupied Indian territories, both China and Russia were conducting military drills along the LAC in Tibetan areas. When the Indian government asked Russia, is this something that we should be worried about, the Russian envoys and the Russian government said that we are just conducting military exercises. This is a routine exercise, you don't need to be worried about it. Trusting the Russian word, India did not make any noise out of it. Though it was aware of these exercises going on there, though they were aware of the Chinese buildup that was happening along the LAC, we did not say much about this issue. You know subsequently what happened. Subsequently, after the completion of the exercises with the Russian military, the Chinese diverted their forces to the border area in Ladakh and tried to change the status quo that India and China had been maintaining since 1962. That is where one place where we had issues with the Russian word, because we always thought, or we were under the assumption that the Russians are allies of India. That may have been the case in the past, but from the recent statements coming out of Russia's President Putin and its foreign office, it more and more so looks like Russia is leaning towards China. So one of the strategic analysts in India, who is known for his knowledge in Indo-Russian ties, said a wonderful statement stating that Russia is no longer an independent country. Instead, Russia is a junior partner of China. That was his statement, and you can see the resonance of his statement in this article also. Meaning, Russia is so compromised with the Chinese finances and Chinese influence that it cannot function without the say-so of the Chinese Communist Party. That is how compromised Russia's finances are and intertwined with Chinese funding to Russian economy. With that knowledge, let us get into the issue here. So, Russian president recently said that both India, China must be responsible enough to resolve issues between two of our countries. And while saying the statement, he said that India should not allow, though he did not say it directly, he merely indicated it by saying that we should debar any extra regional power to interfere in this process. So it simply says that India and China should work out their differences. You shouldn't allow any other countries, particularly the Quad comes to mind, particularly on the top of the list, that countries that come to mind are US. So him saying that carries a lot of significance and weight at this particular time where India and China's relations are at its lowest compared to the past. Now, the implications of such statements are advice. I don't think this is an advice, it's an outright statement saying that you better toe the line of the Chinese, otherwise we are going to have problems. So what is the implication of this statement, particularly coming from the president of Russia, Putin, at this point of time? It simply or merely indicates that Moscow is expecting New Delhi to agree the status quo changes or the assertion of Beijing of Indian territory encroachment that is happening in Aksai-Chin and in Ladakh. So Putin is simply saying, okay, they have occupied your territory, let bygones be bygones, accept the encroachment, work on new things. So that is not acceptable to India. It shouldn't be acceptable to India. Now China has been playing this dirty game since long back, where they have been consistently and continuously trying to destroy our confidence. Ask any analyst in India who studies the Chinese, they clearly say that at any given point of time, whatever the Chinese are doing, they are trying to destroy India's confidence in themselves. Either it may be through propaganda, either it may be through actions, either it may be through certain actions on other countries' lands. They always try to destroy India's growth and India's confidence, and certain times it has been working. Recently there has been a drastic shift in this perspective also. Now the string of pearls, whatever the Belt and Road Initiative, everything at any point of time, what China has been trying to do is to isolate India. They are trying to do it regionally, they are trying to do it globally. Till recently, till 2017, the recent maybe 2018, this has been working. Maybe 2004, some say 2004, let us go with a conservative estimate of 2004 to currently. Till 2004, until the nuclear deal that we made with the Americans, India has been pretty much isolated from the Western powers. And China has been pretty much successful in that. And China enjoyed a lot of fruits from that isolation, because till recently, until Trump came into power, everybody was talking about China as this model country that will shift from communism to democracy once enough growth happens. Even the Americans were believing it. Now look at the situation right now. China controls so much of American economy and American finances that even if America wants to do something, it is at the mercy of Chinese. No, this may sound like a little bit of exaggeration, but go into the control that the Chinese Communist Party or its allies that hold a major stake in American companies right now. Every American company is afraid to make a statement against the Chinese, whether it may be the Uyghur issue, maybe it may be the Hong Kong issue. So there is a lot of compromise that is happening within America in regards to China. The Biden administration is well aware of these consequences, but they are also very compromised in the sense that there is little that they can do. That is why we are seeing the regional groupings such as Quad coming into the forefront of American Indo-Pacific policy. That is the reason that they have chose to change the Asian Pacific to Indo-Pacific. The implications are immense. It means that when you say Indo-Pacific instead of an Asian-Pacific domain, it immediately puts India at the forefront of the policy. Meaning it doesn't restrict India to Malacca Strait. It expands India's projection in the entire Indian Ocean region. India has been working for that, and India has got that recognition, but it is up to India to protect that image and protect that assertiveness that India has on Indian Ocean. So coming back to the article itself, now whatever the remarks that Putin has made, they are directly seen as reinforcing the Chinese claim that quadrilateral is a grouping solely built to counter the growth of China. Now when China says it, it is okay. They are saying out of rhetoric, they are saying out of their own security concerns, or whatever it may be. But when Russia says it, it becomes a point of concern for India. India has been able to maintain a consistent amicable ties with Russia, but with this recent turn of continuous criticism of Indo-Pacific and the Quad has given enough evidence to both analysts and the government of India itself that Russia may have diverted its own perspectives as to how to deal with China and its rise in global circles. Now, is this a point of concern for India? Absolutely, you should be worried about this. See, Russia is not the Russia that it used to be. Russia is not USSR. At this point of time, let me tell you, Russia is simply a single point country, meaning it has only one resource in its arsenal, that is fuel. Its entire economy is dependent on crude oil. The manufacturing power as it was, the technology power as it was, they are all gone right now. Russia has become an uni-product economy. It has crude oil and it is leveraging that crude oil with every other country. Should India be worried about Russia? Yes, every country should be worried about Russia. Because ask anybody, you don't want Russia on your bad side. That is why India is bending front, backwards, left, center, right to make economic ties deeper with Russia, because we want Russia to be more integrated with the Indian economy. We tried so hard that we simply gave out and went out and gave the S-400 deal despite not qualifying. Just so that, despite knowing that we might get CATSA sanctions imposed on us by US. We are bending backwards to engage with Russia, and that is why, let me tell you, currently Japan and India are negotiating a deal where we are thinking of swapping our oil resources. So Japan gets most of its oil from Middle Eastern countries, and India is trying to get more oil, or has a certain stake, or agreed to buy certain stake of crude oil from Russia. Now India and Japan are working in a way where we will take over the Japan's agreements in the Middle East, and Japan will take over India's agreement for purchase of oil with Russia, so that it reduces time and it reduces cost. That is how we are trying to engage with Russia and also incorporate or add our Quad partners in engaging with Russia. So that is a cause of worry, because we are trying to engage with Russia and Russia is saying that yaar aap Chinese ki baat sun lo. So that becomes a problem. Now the Asia Pacific thing and Indo-Pacific thing, Russia has been against the concept of Indo-Pacific, because they don't want Indo-Pacific to be a construct, because they sincerely believe that the Indo-Pacific construct is an American construct, meaning it had its origins with the Americans, so the Russians will deny it. But the problem is, the Indo-Pacific construct is not only American construct, it should be Indian construct also, because it puts India at the forefront of Indo-Pacific policy. So when our External Affairs Minister Jaishankar made certain observations on various forums recently, where he observed that the incorporation of Indo-Pacific concept in Indian diplomacy means that India can no longer be confined between Malacca Straits and Gulf of Aden, It means that we are not agreeing with the observations made by either the Chinese, Russian Prime President or Russian Foreign Ministry. Now the problem comes when Russia is unequivocally is advocating, meaning supporting China's global vision, and this has left our own departments or our own government in a lurch, because we don't know what to do with this. Yes, we know what to do with it, but anything that we do might have negative implications in terms of relationship with the Russians. Now we are particularly worried about how Moscow is downplaying the excessive display of Chinese military either in Indian front or in South China Sea. So this coercive military pressure that China is exerting on India, and even though Russia knows it, it is downplaying it, saying that this is something that China does, let us accept it. Now, the reality of the matter is, I already told you in earlier articles when we were dealing with the Ladakh situation, there is no clean way or clean exit out of Ladakh right now. Things are certainly bad there. If you think that it is going to get amicably settled, we have to think our own strategies. We have to rethink our entire understanding and paradigm of how China operates. Situation is literally far more fragile than it was earlier. The problem comes with the lack of data or lack of information coming out of that area, because the government is reluctant to give out that data, and the army certainly never gives out any data to public because it is an active situation. Now when these things started happening, Russia started proposing a new kind of a strategic triangularity called the strategic triangle that involved Russia, India and China. See, during the Cold War, Russia and China were bitter enemies. They fought a war over it because Russia accused and China was closer to US, so there was this thing going on between those two countries that everybody thought that the aligning of Russian interest and the Chinese interest would never happen in the history of the world. But like a decade later, look at how things changed. Russia has literally become the junior partner of China right now. So when Russia proposed this strategic triangle, the problem became evident when Russia started backing the Chinese assertion over Indian territory. Now, if India was part of this strategic triangle that was proposed by Russia, India would have also become a junior partner to China by this point of time right now. For whatever reason, for whatever the powers that may be, India realized that if we join this strategic triangle, India is going to get strangled out of the world balance and we are going to get screwed over here. As a result of this absolute realistic fear or concerns, India had extensively engaged with all its diplomatic resources and energies to reconnect with the United States. That was one of the best strategic things that we had done in the past. Now, over a period of time, though there were certain ups and downs, one thing that can be said between the relationship between India and US is it has been pretty much militaristic. Now we are trying to diverge into other areas also, which is an indication of how ground realities are changing in the particularly Southeast Asian region. Now, when we started strengthening our cooperation with the United States, Russia was very much worried what we are doing, and on top of that, China was more worried, because when we started our engagement with the US or restarted our engagement with the United States, the primary engagement was based on our needs of military material or military equipment. Now, when America experienced its fair share of terrorism post 9/11 or with 9/11, our surface area of engagement also transgressed into terrorism. Now we have a very good engagement in terms of not only military equipment wise, but we also share a common goal of ending terrorism in the world, or at least ending is not in the sight, but at least trying to put a lid on this ghost called terrorism. China has also allowed India and US to work on another front, that is to stem the assertiveness of the Chinese influence on the world. Not only this, we have been very much actively engaging with Japan, recently Australia. Our relationship with Australia has been fraught with little bit miscommunications and communication gaps, but nonetheless, we are actively engaging with Australians also, and Japan has always been one of the allies that we always had a good relationship with, but nonetheless never explored. Recently that has changed. We are exploring multiple new avenues with Japan also. It is not only the investment paradigm of relationship with Japan, we are now extending into other facets of diplomatic relationship with China and Australia. Now this is an act of balancing that India is trying to do. With US we are doing a hard bargain. With the help of Japan and Australia we are doing a soft bargain. We are trying to diversify our own diplomatic triangle here. Now the problem is India is trying to balance an unbalanceable situation. China is so skewed and so heavy at this point of time that India, despite all its effort, is unable to balance the scales right now. That is the greatest concern for us right now also. And China is also worried how India is getting closer and closer to the Americans right now. Because remember, in the Quad partnership, yes, Australia and Japan do play a significant role, but their role is limited. What worries China at this point of time is not the Quad grouping itself, but India-US reapproachment as containment. The lack of weight on India's backyard to balance the scale with the China. With the addition of US, it skews more in favor of India than that of the Chinese. That is what worries it. That is why they are using Russia to put a pressure on India to not to change the status quo that it has with either Russia or with the US. They want the situation or the relationship with both the countries to be stagnant, and they are using Russia as a point of leverage to curtail US getting closer with India right now. It is undeniable that Russia is a defense partner to us. As I told you, we went more than what we could ask for just to ensure that we are engaged with the Russians, and went out and brought the S-400 despite knowing certain discrepancies in the S-400 system itself. So ask any defense analyst right now. S-400 is a good anti-aircraft system. It's not an anti-ICMB system. So that is other details, but we are not going into that. So we need Russia as our defense partner. But what problem does that brings out is that allows Russia to force this perspective that China is good and Indo-Pacific is bad and Quad is bad. We cannot let Russia do that to us. Though there are certain risks involved in it, we have to be assertive in that. So when the strategic triangle that Russia was talking about involved Russia, but at this point of time, Russia has been reduced to a junior partner to China. Now the real strategic domain involves between India, US and China, that is New Delhi, Washington and Beijing. Other powers, as I said earlier, though they have a certain say in what goes in Indo-Pacific region, their impact in the maritime structures that are developing out of Indo-Pacific region are limited. When it comes to the entire maritime structure of Indo-Pacific region, 3 countries dictate it, and 3 countries are only the countries that are going to matter. That is India, China and US. As I said, being China's junior partner only undermines Moscow's great power ambitions. At this point of time, Russia has become a junior henchman, repeating whatever the master repeats. Now, it is not in the best interest of Russia itself to look at India-China relationships from the perspective of the Chinese. So if we allow this idea of the Russians that China is good, Indian policies are a little bit bad to become a permanent stature in their statements, in their actions, India is going to have a very negative impact. Because if Russia becomes a truly pro-Beijing ally, which it is already right now, but if it becomes much more pro-China than what it is right now, that might allow or force Russians to adopt a more aggressive stance in blocking India's policy agendas in the world organizations. That is a particular concern for us. We have to balance that and we have to prevent that also. That is why it is in the best interest of the Indians that Americans and Russians are talking again and the relations are normalizing between those two countries. Because once that relationship becomes, though very unstable, becomes some sort of normal, it will allow India to operate in a much more free manner between these two countries. The identity share that we had, that is both our countries, China and India, were oppressed, they were ruled by other countries, they were taken advantage by other countries. That was the idea of the past. Right now China is becoming more assertive and China is becoming that country that is trying to control India right now, and it is using multilateral forums such as Russia, India, China, RIC grouping, BRICS, and these groupings at this point of time are so tilted towards the Chinese that they have little to no value to India right now. Whatever the Indian diplomacy tries to do it in these groupings, China has already done it and they are trying to undermine the Indian confidence. Again, the confidence card plays into picture. Remember this. Whatever concessions that we give to the Chinese, it has to be reciprocated. Without that reciprocation, anything that India does is bad for India. Remember that. So without the reciprocation of the Chinese actions that are materialistic, there is evidence that Chinese are changing their ways. Until and unless that is done, India's concessions to the Chinese will always impact India negatively. Right now, China is acting as if nobody can touch it. It is actually acting as if no country on heaven and earth can touch it. But there will come an inflection point in its own assertiveness that it is going to get caught into. Currently, every economic analyst that you observe or speak with or study says that China will get trapped in the middle income economic group, meaning the middle class will earn and that economic group will get stuck. There will be no growth there. You are seeing the long-term implications of One Belt, One Road initiative, how damaging it has been to the Chinese. Beijing will always have this policy of constraining and castrating India in regional powers or global powers, because it cannot have another strategic power grow in its own backyard. But India cannot allow China to control in our own backyard. Moving to the next article, work begins on Kriva class frigate. So Kriva class frigate is a Russian stealth frigate that is India is building with the help of transfer of technology from Russia. This is the second frigate in this class, and the government is intent on arming these stealth frigates with BrahMos missiles as a deterrence to any adversaries in the Indian Ocean region or any other oceans in India. This is a way to enhance our naval capabilities, and this stealth frigate is going to help us in achieving certain deterrence goals. Moving on to the next article, Navy team in US for chopper training. So we know that India has bought on a global buy basis 24 MH-60 Romeo helicopters for Indian Navy. These helicopters' speciality is anti-submarine warfare. They are good at hunting submarines. We know that the Chinese have developed a potent, capable submarine warfare capabilities. They have a number of submarines that are loitering at any given time in Indian Ocean region, and India needs a way to monitor and surveil these submarines. We don't want any surprises from the Chinese submarines like we had in the past. Now this will certainly help Indian Navy in countering the growing Chinese influence or submarine influence in Indian Ocean waters. Now the speciality of these helicopters are they are going to increase our long range surveillance capability and response capabilities. These helicopters are not only good in the use of surveillance, they are best when they can mount an offensive on the submarines that are found. So they can take multiple roles. They can do the role of reconnaissance and surveillance. Once that is done, they can shift from that role into offensive mode and it can be used as attack points on submarines. So the picture you are looking at is the Indian version that Boeing has officially released. That is how this helicopter will look with the colors and the insignia of Indian Navy. Now the Navy team currently that is in US is going to train on 3 choppers that are being built for India. Once they get familiarity of the equipment and the helicopter itself, the delivery is going to start within the stipulated time frame. So India currently needs, or Indian Navy currently needs anywhere between 120 to 140 helicopters, multi-utility helicopters to completely fill the strategic gaps that it has in its equipment. Though 26 is a small number, but nonetheless it is going to help in at least fulfilling the short-term needs of the Navy along with the Navy Reaper drones that India is leasing from United States. Moving on to the next article, in a bit of good news in conservation, pact signed to conserve rare turtle in Assam. So remember the difference between turtle and tortoise. Turtle are waterborne, tortoises are land, meaning tortoises can stay on land for longer periods of time. Turtles do spend majority of their life underwater, whether it may be freshwater or saltwater. Saltwater in the sense regions lying close to coastal areas. Now one of the reasons is the freshwater black soft shell turtle is endemic to Assam and Bangladesh. Till recently it was thought that this animal or this particular species of turtle which is endemic to Assam has been lost forever, meaning it got extinct. But recently sightings have been made, or certain sightings of this particular turtle was made in wild, rejigging or reinventing the hope for their survival and their preservation. Now the problem with that is, until now whatever the population that is surviving of this turtle has been in temple areas, meaning temple ponds and surrounding areas. The temples were doing it on religious basis and faith basis, not conservation basis. Now certain district administrations and various NGOs have come together to provide additional security and safety and ensure that this population which is already in the temple ponds and other areas be thrive and may in future expand to wilder areas. That is the intent here. Again, the animal that we are talking about here is the freshwater black soft shell turtle, which is endemic to Assam and Bangladesh, Assam alone in India. And the idea is it was thought that it was extinct, but no more in the wild, that is, and it does not enjoy any legal protection under Indian Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, although this animal has been hunted extensively for meat purposes and cartilage purposes. So moving on to the next article, death due to COVID-19 must be certified as such center. So one of the reasons that states are being accused of are, when a person dies of COVID-19, when a death certificate is issued to the next of kin or the family, the states are listing the death or issuing the death certificate with some other cause other than COVID-19. This has resulted in discrepancies and in many cases lack of claim or prevention of claim to insurances. So prevent this from happening, the central government came out with a guideline stating that states cannot do that. States have to identify the cause of death based on the actual cause of death. If the person died because of COVID, you have to issue that certificate stating that he died because of COVID and not otherwise. Moving on to the next article, health infrastructure has increased 45-fold center. In a bit of good news, the infrastructure, particularly healthcare infrastructure, according to central government statistics, shows that compared to earlier infrastructure, health infrastructure, due to pandemic and the needs that it brought forth, there has been a drastic increase of healthcare infrastructure in India. Though there are certain discrepancies in the data that the central government has brought forward, but nonetheless the numbers are welcoming. We need more, but this is welcoming. For example, the number of ICU beds before pre-pandemic were 2,500. Now the number of ICU beds in India is 1,13,035 beds, which is a welcoming sign. But we need to augment this in a permanent basis. Many of these numbers are temporary basis. We need to convert that temporary structures into permanent structures and prepare for future pandemics. Moving on to the next article, scale up public health social measures according to World Health Organization. In a guideline specifically pertaining to Southeast Asian region, where the Delta variant is a cause of concern and the number of cases are rising day by day, the World Health Organization has advised countries that you have to scale up your healthcare infrastructure to meet the needs, and you have to reorient your policy based on ground situations and not anything else. So that is the issue. They realize that vaccination has picked up in this region, but nonetheless, the numbers do not support the facts in certain cases because the vaccination level, though has picked up, is still low considered to developed countries. That is why they are saying that you have to continue your surveillance methods, you have to continue your scaling up of infrastructure, particularly ICU beds, medications and other critical medical equipment and procedures to treat COVID-19 patients. Moving on to the next article, Taliban say committed to Afghan peace talks but want Islamic system. Now we know that America is pulling out of Afghanistan. The talks between Taliban and Afghan government has come to a standstill, but nonetheless, to allay certain fears in regards to how the governance is going to be post to pulling out of America and the inevitable takeover of Taliban of Afghanistan, the Taliban has come out and said that we are committed to peace talks and they wanted a genuine Islamic system in Afghanistan that would make provisions for women's rights and in line with cultural traditions and religious rules of Islam. So the problem with this statement is, though they are saying that they are going to respect the rights of the women, in the last few months, in the high escalation of violence that we are seeing, the biggest victims of this particular escalation in violence is women, because they are targeting women journalists and women outliers in Afghan society who have broken the shells or the conservative shells of Afghan society and stepped forward into limelight. They are particularly killing and carrying out targeted killings of women journalists who have been reporting. As a result of this, many of the journalists are seeking asylum in various other countries to protect their family and their own life. So the doublespeak is clearly seen here. So that is the issue here. But we have to wait and see how the Afghan government is going to negotiate, because since the Afghan president is soon to visit America to renegotiate certain sections of the peace deal that America is negotiating with Taliban right now. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
Borthakur IAS Academy. প্রস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
Borthakur IAS Academy.